Hello friends and welcome back to another episode. Today I would like to talk about a new camera that will soon be released from Fujifilm. It is their medium format, okay, that's in quotes, okay. It's 1.7 times larger than full frame, but not quite a true medium format, but that's okay. We'll roll with it, and the industry is calling it medium format, so we'll just roll with it as well. But anyways, I'm really excited about this camera. I think it's going to be a tremendous camera, and it's the GFX 50S. So I'm showing you a shot of the camera here. I borrowed this from dpreview.com. Okay, so let's talk about the stats now, or the numbers of the cameras, okay, because this is really important, and I'll tell you why I'm excited about this camera. So we have here, this column is the 5DS, and this column is the 50S from Fuji. So the difference being, of course, this is full frame, this is medium format, and it's roughly the same amount of photo sites on the sensor, right? Same megapixel count, 50.6 megapixels versus 51.4 megapixels. Okay, it doesn't sound like a big difference, okay? It's only a 2% increase, but we're going to get into the math here right now, okay? So the sensor size is 36 millimeters by 24, and in the Fuji, it's 43.8 by 32.9. Okay, so when you do the surface area, or the area of the sensor itself, it's 67% larger than the Canon full frame. Okay, so that's quite a big difference. So even though the pixel count is roughly the same, okay, right? But when you do the square microns, how many square microns are on the sensor? Because we're at 67% increase in surface area, we have 864 million square microns on the Canon sensor. Okay, and then on the Fuji we have 1,441,020,000 square microns. Okay, and again that's a 67% increase. So okay, Rob, you might be asking, Rob, get to the point. Okay, what does this mean in real terms? So here we go. This is kind of negligible here for a moment. Now, there is a difference in the sensor size, where the aspect ratio, okay, this is a 3:2 aspect ratio. Most of your full frames, right, if they're divisible by 12, so if you divide by 12, this is 3:2. It's the 3:2 aspect ratio, where this is a 4:3. This is going to be a 4:3 aspect ratio native. Now, you can take images and other aspect ratios from what I've read, but the native aspect ratio is 4:3. So here we're going to get right down to the point. I made a few videos that were quite lengthy on DxO and so forth and so on, about photo site size. So the 5DS is, I've established, again, so we're free to disagree. If you disagree with me, that's fine, no hard feelings. But to me, the low threshold on the photo site size is 5 microns by 5 microns. Okay, the minimum threshold that it can be until things start really going squirrely and going south is 5 microns along one axis, for a total of 25. Obviously, if you square it, it's 25 square microns. So we see the 5DS is not there. It's at the 4 micron level, is so where the current crop of Nikon APS-C cameras for a long time have been about 3.9 or 4 microns. Okay, so when you square it, you get 17.1 here on the Canon, 17.1 square microns per each photo site. The Fuji, and this is why I'm elated about this camera. I am so excited about this camera, because they really get it. Okay, Fujifilm gets it. I think they're aware that the low threshold is 5 microns. They could have made this. They could have made the photo site smaller, but they didn't intentionally. And I think here's why. It's same as their XT1 and XT2. They kept the pixel count low because they understand image quality is paramount above all other things, above resolution. Okay, I know this runs contrary to DxO's philosophy, but Fujifilm understands that nothing trumps image quality. And along with a large photo site, you get dynamic range. Okay, so the larger the photo site, you get dynamic range that goes along for the ride. So there's much more to gain with a larger photo site than with a smaller photo site. Okay, so again, Fujifilm kept the per pixel or per photo site surface area greater than 25 square microns. So we see here they even allowed a little buffer of 3/10 of a micron. Okay, so they're at 5.3 by 5.3 for 28 square microns. So let's talk about, again, so this is a 64. Now the surface area is 64% larger than the 5DS photo site. So that's 64% more light gathering ability, which is going to be reflected in, number one, your image quality. It's going to be a cleaner image. and it's also going to have better dynamic range. Okay, you're going to get better dynamic range with a larger photo sight. So again, so we see here the amount of raw pixels are the same, but when you account for the surface area, you're getting a lot more bang for the buck. Okay, so let's talk, not literally per dollar. I mean, I'm not, what I'm saying is you're getting a lot more clarity, image quality on per real estate. Okay, so let's go here to the bottom line. What does this all mean? Okay, you can use a much more affordable lens due to the photo size being greater than 25 square microns. And we covered that if you remember the video I did. Once you cross the 5 micron threshold, you have to go from consumer glass to pro glass when you go sub 5 micron. Okay, so again, they're keeping this here so that what they're trying to do is the camera body is going to be very expensive to begin with, and plus the image circle. So the image circle is, the lens is going to be more expensive because it has to be a better glass, it has to be a larger glass, because instead of a 36 by 24 image circle, it has to now circumscribe or encompass the 43 by 32 by 9 sensor. So the glass is going to be more expensive inherently, but what they were trying to do to minimize even more financial hardship is say, look, if we keep the pixel size or the photosite size greater than 25 square microns, the glass, it doesn't have to be like this quadruple A rating glass, right? We can get away with some decent glass, and that's what they're doing here. Okay, so it's a mirrorless camera. There'll be no mirror to slap, right? So, and we talked about that before. I think part of the problem with the sub 5 microns was, number one was mirror slap, and number two was shutter shock. Okay, so you have two different systems introducing vibration into the body of the camera, and they were causing the sensor to vibrate at the time of capture. So here they're eliminating one of the two variables. Okay, they're eliminating the mirrorless, or the mirror, so there is no mirror to slap and cause vibration. So that would leave just the shutter, and we can only hope that the shutter is not a leaf shutter in the lens. It's going to be a focal plane shutter with curtains. So we can only hope that they're going to minimize the vibration in that camera, so that it won't introduce too much vibration to the sensor. And I think they're going to be okay. Above 5 microns, they should be okay. Okay, and lastly, handheld images are possible due to the photosite size being greater than 25 square microns. And again, we talked about that before. Once you go sub 5 micron, they get so small that the camera has to be so stabilized. It's just unbelievable. Remember we were talking about putting it on a tripod and then using a live view, and we were talking about turning a DSLR into a mirrorless camera. Well, the good thing about this is it's already a mirrorless camera. So I think a lot of the blur images that could be seen in DSLRs that went sub 5 micron, I think these are going to be corrected on two counts. Again, one, it's a mirrorless camera, and two, the photo sites are greater than 25 square microns. Okay, so let's talk about the concerns. I have some concerns in general about where the camera industry is going. So let's talk about that. Okay, the camera industry started going upmarket in 2012, and by that, like, again, in full disclosure, I've been a Nikon guy all my life. It's really all I know for the most part. I mean, I was really tuned up on Nikon, and much less so in the other manufacturers. So what happened is in 2011, previous to 2011, there were APS-C cameras enthusiasts, right? We call them prosumer or enthusiasts. We were talking about people who were in the middle, right? They weren't full-time professional photographers, but they didn't want little point and shoots. They wanted something, a bridge, kind of. It's not really a bridge camera per se, literally. They wanted a DSLR, but they wanted a DSLR that could produce results, good results. And the industry was delivering that. Nikon was delivering that up to and including 2011 with their APS-C cameras. They were 10, 12, 14, and 16 megapixels. Okay, they ranged from as low as 10 to high as 16 megapixels. Starting in 2012, they went to, and here, this is where I have this, prior to 2011, they were APS-C. You could get the body and a good lens. We're going back to the 50 millimeter f1.8 or the 35 millimeter f1.8. That was DX only. That was a DX only lens. But my point was, body and lens, you were about $600, and you had phenomenal image quality. Okay, the image quality was great because the photo sites were larger than 25 square microns, and consumer level glass could resolve that level of detail. So my point is, for $600, you got a rock solid DSLR that produced excellent images. Okay, 2012. So 2012 was the game changer. I think to a certain point, they had Nikon and all the manufacturers had a decision to make whether they're going to compete with the smartphones now. Because again, this was about the same time Apple released the iPhone 4S, and when they saw the image quality from the 4S in October of 2011, they had a decision to make. They said, are we going to compete in this space? Are we just going to resign it to the smartphone manufacturers, the Samsungs and the Apples? And apparently, it looks that's exactly what business choice they did make. Is they resigned themselves to that market, to the sub $600 market, and said, we'll just leave this to the smartphone manufacturers, and we'll go up market, we'll go upscale in our offerings. I think, which is a dreadful mistake that they made, but we'll cover that. So starting in 2012, they went. It was primarily full frame, right? We had, because the D600, I think, was the D600, D610 was the kind of the game changer. It brought full frame into the realm of affordability, right? So the person had a decision to make. Could I go with one of these expensive APS-C cameras, or just for a few $100s more, I could be in the 600, the 610? And I think that's what really pushed people over the edge. It drove them to a full frame, but then it started getting more and more expensive as the photo sites started getting smaller and smaller. We're at the point now where the D800, D810, and the new 5DS, right? We're at very expensive and ground now on the full frame cameras. Okay, so you can see the leap here. 2011 and prior, you got excellent image quality for $600. The very next year, starting in 2012, now it didn't happen overnight, but over time from 2012 to 2016, this APS-C camera, when they went to 24 megapixels, they climbed to $1,000. They almost doubled in price. Okay, so APS-C jumped to 1200, and now with these high density megapixel cameras, we're between $4,000 and $5,000 with the body and a decent lens. Okay, now here's my point now with the Fujifilm. It's a wonderful camera, and I think the images are going to be absolutely brilliant from this camera. And again, I think they're going to be brilliant for one reason, is this large photo site. Okay, it's going to have great detail, it's going to have great image quality, and it's going to have great dynamic range all in one package. But here's my problem. I think it's going to be priced, if it's going to compete with the Hasselblads, with the body and a decent lens, you're probably going to be somewhere between 10,000 to 15. Now, I'm just ballparking this, right? The body could be somewhere around 7,000 to 10,000. So I'm kind of thinking maybe from 7,000 to 15,000. Again, ballparkish. Okay, but here's my point. So here's my point on this. I know I have a lot of points, but bear with me, right? So in 2011, a consumer, an advanced consumer, so let's say a prosumer, that's why the conjunction, right? Professional consumer, prosumer, and enthusiast, you got great image quality for $600. We're in this period now of 2012 to 16, where now we've seen this almost tenfold, ninefold, eightfold increase in price to get similar great image quality. And now we're looking at medium format. If people are going to make the leap, so we made the leap from APS-C to full frame, and if we're expected to make the leap into medium format, look what's happening to the price. So I was doing some research here on stock prices of all the camera manufacturers. There's only one it's increasing, and it's Sony. Fujifilm is kind of constant. It's neither rising nor falling. But Canon and Nikons are in the tank. And here's why. Stock prices reflect the alienation of the average enthusiast. So they're squeezing people out of the market. And I was trying to think. So I'm thinking in my mind, why did they resign the low-end space, the APS-C, the D3000, D3100, D5000, D5100? Why did they resign that sweet spot where most people are going to come into the DSLR market or to the professional camera market in that price range, right? And then they're going to go up market on their own. They're going to fall in love with photography, and they will take themselves up market completely on their own. Okay, that was the hook. You get them in at the $400 to $600 price range. So I'm thinking, if they're resigning mom and pop, okay, the average consumer, then if they think they're going to go back to the olden days where if you want a great image, you have to go to a photography studio, right? Not every main street had a photography studio, one or more mom and pop studios where you went and had your professional pictures taken, right? So I'm thinking, is that what Nikon and Canon and these manufacturers actually think, that they're going to revive the mom and pop photography studios on Main Street? Because if you take serious cameras out of the hands of the average consumer, you make them so expensive here, You make these cameras anywhere from $4,000 to $15,000. The average person can't afford that. So do Nikon and Canon and these other manufacturers actually think they're going to revive the mom and pop studio? So it's so expensive now I have to go back to a specialty studio to have a photograph taken? Well, it's not going to happen. So if that's what they really think, they're going to go back to the days where they sold the F3 and the F4, the F5, and right the FM2 and the FM3A, FEs, so forth and so on, right? Because that's what you had to do if you're going to go to a professional photography studio. It was out of the hands of the average person, and only the professional photographer could afford it. So I'm like, man, I'm not getting this, but I'm getting back to this. Okay, so the investment community en masse, right, is talking to the camera manufacturer. Now I'm going to do a separate standalone episode on stock prices, but the investment community is telling all the camera manufacturers, we don't like where you're going. You are pricing the buyers out of the market. Sales are flat. You're going in the wrong direction. You need to revive this market here, the APS-C market for $600. That's the hook that got people into serious photography. And you departed that space. You resigned that space in 2011. And for the last 4 or 5 years, the stock prices have been tanking. Again, other than Sony, Canon and Nikon stock is in the tank. Because again, they were selling cameras here when cameras were $600. We're getting back now to and I know I've digressed quite a bit from but I'm trying to say, as the industry in general, if they want us to buy into medium format, so we're transitioning right from APS-C to full frame to medium format. Who among us is going to go out to the store and lay $10,000 to $15,000 down on a camera as a hobby? Okay, again, we're not shooting for Vogue, we're not shooting for Harper's Bazaar or Vanity Fair or Porter. So, I mean, who of us can afford this? And this is why the stock is flat, because it's like Ferrari. Can you imagine if there was no Chevy or Ford or Toyota or Honda? I mean, how many people could go out and buy a $200,000 Ferrari as their main transportation, or right? So my point, this is where the camera manufacturers have absolutely lost their marbles by taking the market so upscale, because not too many people are going to buy these products, which again, and I'm repeating myself now very much, which is why the stock is in the tank, because they price these things so high that nobody's buying the product. Again, I just don't get it. This does not pass the common sense test. But this is, you can see here, this is where the market is going, from 600 to 400 to 5,000, now to 10,000 to 15,000. Who's buying this stuff? That's what I want to know, really. Who is buying these products? Because I can't figure it out. So I'm going to leave the comments open below. Please help me out. You tell me, who in the world is buying a $10,000 camera as a hobbyist? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Okay. Thank you very much.